Hello everybody, this is ManuS and welcome to another Legends of Runeterra patch notes review. The latest patch notes for patch 1.6 are out, which will drop later today. And we have quite a bunch of changes to talk about as usual, but before we do, you know the drill. Hit the subscribe button down below to not miss out on future content. And let me briefly introduce you to today's sponsor. Today's video is sponsored by NordVPN, one of the leading virtual private network providers out there. A virtual private network keeps your data secure and yourself anonymous while using the internet. NordVPN comes with super fast servers, allows you to unlock your favorite entertainment websites like Netflix. They provide a 30-day money-back guarantee. They also have an included cybersecurity suite, which acts as an ad blocker to boot. They don't lock any of your data, provide a 24/7 customer support, and you can use it on up to 6 simultaneous connections, so one account covers most or all of your electronic devices. And most importantly, they don't have any bandwidth limit, so you can use it non-stop without it getting throttled, which is particularly important for heavy users like us. It also won multiple awards and comes highly recommended by top technology experts. So if you're still surfing online without a VPN, now is the time to change that. Get NordVPN now, 70% off for a 3-year plan, including 1 month extra for free using the code ManuS or the personalized link in the description down below. And now on to today's content. Alright, so that's the patch. They have been talking a bit about balancing, so they want to let me just briefly read it for you. When designing and balancing LOR, we strive to set players up to dictate the metagame by giving them a variety of tools to adapt and to solve novel challenges. While we're seeing a healthy range and diversity of different decks being played, certain pervasive archetypes, Elusive, Ionia, Control, Heimerdinger, Noxus-based Aggro, have proven too consistently powerful in a way that's limiting meaningful decision-making both in and out of game. Left unchecked, this restricts deck building choices, crowding out poorly positioned strategies, and inhibiting players' ability to adapt over time. Several of the changes you'll see below are targeted at powering down these archetypes in specific ways, while we generally reserve nerfs for decks that cross win rate thresholds. This patch we are making adjustments to cards and strategies that may not be statistically overpowered, but represent pervasive health risks. By weakening them, we hope to unlock a wider range of consistently viable archetypes. In a similar vein, this patch also includes tweaks to several discard units aimed at increasing their satisfaction and usability and providing a more varied foundation for the archetype. Alright, so we also get the first event, the Spirit Blossom Festival. There's a preview article here that you can check out. I'll put the patch notes as usual in the description below, so you can go check out the preview article from there. Gets us a new lab with some interesting rules. We'll see how that plays. I didn't like the current lab very much. It was kind of lame, but maybe this is cooler. We get epic quests and rewards, as well as like a battle pass that has some free elements that you can get without buying it, and then the premium stuff for buying the battle pass. Alright, let's dive into the card updates. So first off, the long-awaited Heimerdinger changes here. That's a pretty big one actually. So they swap turrets. Now the Fearsome turret goes from 4 to 3, the Elusive turret goes from 3 to 6, and the Overwhelm turret goes from 6 to 4. That, I think, massively changes Heimerdinger. I'm a bit surprised. I would have expected maybe the Elusive turrets to go to 2, just make them smaller, but still reasonably producible, to sort of keep the core gameplay intact, but make them a lot worse at defense, the primary turret you want, and also make them slower on offense. I thought that would have been an interesting change. This kind of, I guess, aligns Heimerdinger a bit more with Lux, as in sort of the best turret kind of being a 6-cost turret now. But it also makes Heimerdinger much worse and much different, and like the 3-cost turrets are mainly good for like defense now, and I honestly feel like Heimerdinger might not survive this, and I think Heimerdinger will either disappear completely or become pretty fringe, because I think his playability hinged so much on the turrets being cheap. Maybe if they had moved the elusives to 4, it would have still been okay. But yeah, the turrets being past the 4 cost mark is a real problem, and the turrets not being that good at basically pressuring the opponent takes away a lot of what made Heimerdinger good, and I have serious concerns that Heimerdinger will just kind of fade into obscurity. Maybe there will be like a decent Lux Heimerdinger deck or something, I don't know. But yeah, some pretty big changes. I like that they changed Heimerdinger, because I felt like the way he was a bit like obnoxious. Like, if he was good, he was really, really good, to a point where it was really oppressive and really frustrating to play against, and just kind of a single card that could snowball the game out of control so much. And without any real setup, like unlike Ezreal, where you at least need to like level him and set him up, with Heimerdinger all you needed was a bunch of cards and some mana, and then you just went off. Even like with Flash, you just went like Flash plus a 3-cost spell, had 2 turrets right out of the gate on turn 5. Just very frustrating. Also a lot of good tools to protect Heimerdinger, so it was also really hard to kill Heimerdinger right away. Next, we have Braum. Some toning down after they pushed him, so he'll lose his 1 power, so he'll be an 0-5 and a 1-6 now, instead of a 1-5 and a 2-6. It's reasonable. Braum was very powerful. He's still going to be pretty solid, but I think the loss of the 1 attack point is still going to be a fairly big deal, because it mattered a lot that he had like board impact the turn you played him by either deterring small attackers for free, because not just would he make a Poro if that happened, he would also kill one of your units. Now he doesn't do that anymore. He also could like take care of some problematic units like a tracker or a saboteur and stuff like that. Now he's just back to kind of being this wall that doesn't kill anything. He still makes the Poro, which is pretty good, but I think it will notably decrease his playability again in a wide variety of decks, and will be more fringe in very specific decks. Like Anivia Braum probably still wants him, for example. In some kind of like, I guess the Braum Swain deck, if it will still be a relevant archetype, would still play him. Stuff like that. But I think, for example, Elusives wouldn't be very interested in him anymore. And a couple of other options, like more proactive mid-rangey things that I think don't care as much about him anymore. But we'll see how he plays out. He was definitely very pushed before, so it's probably for the better, but it will definitely notably change his role and impact in a way that will make him go from like a primary heavily played champion to more of a situational narrow champion again, I think, but definitely in a much better spot than he used to be. Then Ignivia goes from 2 health to 1 health. Kind of like that change. She felt a bit too frustrating to get rid of, and there's a lot of stuff that deals 1 damage, but not that much that deals 2, so it was really hard to kill the egg. So Ignivia was effectively unkillable, rather than like harder to kill, because most decks simply like just can't kill the egg reliably, so the opponent can just keep throwing away the Anivia. So making the egg more fragile, I think, is a pretty reasonable change to make her feel less frustrating. Once again, a card that isn't like super overpowered or anything, but it had this kind of frustrating play pattern aspect to it that makes it a bit more like manageable and less frustrating, and also creates more of a like interplay, so you can actually try and like kind of contain the opponent's Anivias and try to keep them from getting out of control, rather than just inevitably snowballing out of control once the first died, and they just keep bringing a couple back. Then we have some spell changes. Relentless Pursuit is now slow. They wanted to do this for some time, as they mentioned here, since it's kind of intended as a slow speed effect. This has like quite some implications though. There are like 3 scenarios in which the fast speed mattered. First one is the opponent plays a spell, especially if they open their turn with a spell. You could just Pursuit in response, get priority as soon as the chain resolves, and then attack and attack before they get to attack. So the opponent basically cannot play a spell before attacking, otherwise you can sort of steal their attack. The other thing is you could do that in general as sort of a free action. So the opponent plays a spell at any point, and you can Relentless Pursuit without losing an action, which means as soon as the chain resolves, you get priority and get to attack without the opponent like getting another action to sort of prepare for the unexpected attack. Now, the opponent plays a spell, you get priority, you play Pursuit, the opponent gets priority, they know you now have an attack token where you before didn't have one, so they can adjust their course, can adjust what they're doing and maybe play a unit or take an action that is improving their defense against that unexpected attack. So that is quite notable. The other one is in combat. Basically, you could reduce opponent's actions. You could either open attack and with the attack Pursuit, so the opponent only gets the one action after the combat, then you get priority again and you can attack again. Now you have to attack, the opponent gets an action, then you get priority again, you Pursuit, they get another action, so they automatically get 2 actions before you can Pursuit. Before you can attack again. That doesn't always matter, but it once again gives them more room to sort of catch up from behind. Like, it's less snowbally. Like, if they are behind, now they get more time to catch up before they get hit with another attack. Well, before, basically, if they were behind, Pursuit could push them even further behind. And the other thing is obviously, like, on defense, your opponent is attacking you, you could, like, mid-combat Pursuit, and as soon as the combat ends, you get priority and can attack right away without the opponent getting any chance to sort of set up for this unexpected attack. And all these instances now go away, because now you can see the Relentless Pursuit coming and set up for it by getting a whole extra action and having it telegraphed. Which I think is making the card quite a bit worse. But overall, in the decks that it's primarily played in currently, which is the Master Unit heavy decks, it's still a very good card, and only so much worse. It's just much more manageable when facing it than before, but there's a fair share of situations where it doesn't even matter. Like, you attack, both have spent their power because both have been developing, and then with your last 3 power, at the end of the turn, you go Pursuit and attack again. In spots like that, Pursuit doesn't matter at all. But now you can't basically steal actions anymore with it. Next, we have Arena Bookie. That card was so bad. It was a 3-cost 2/1. It was so underpowered, so overcasted. Now it's at least reasonable. It's a 2-cost 2/2 and still has the same effect. I think the card is still not great, but at least now it's a card to like sort of think about and consider playing and mess around with. It's like in the realm of experimentation, while before the card was just like laughably bad, in my opinion. Every time someone like brought it up and suggested it while I was still playing like Jinxed Raven, for example, I was just like, yeah, that card is not even in the realm of discussion. The card is just unplayable. Next we have Basilisk Rider. Bit of a tone down. Now it's a 5/4 overwhelm. Before it used to be a 5/3, then a 6/4, and now it's a 5/4, which I think is reasonable. The deck was getting out of control a bit with all the buffs it got, and I think the most critical point on Rider was the 4th health point, so that's still up there. But I feel like as a 5/4, it might be a bit too little of a payoff, a bit too weak for an Allegiance card to sort of commit to being almost mono Noxus. So we probably see the disappearance of Allegiance Noxus and maybe move into more of a 2-faction. There will be more of a 2-faction aggressive deck, and Basilisk Rider will fall by the wayside again, but I'm not 100% sure. It's still, it's now, I think, certainly one of the weakest Allegiance cards, even though it's still better than before. But it is, like, gaining a 4-cost 5/4 Overwhelm is really just not that impressive. There's a fair share of units that trade with it while taking 1 or 0 damage, and it just, yeah, it doesn't even like can attack into something like Sejuani anymore later down the line, and it's just, yeah, just a very solid unit, but nothing to go out of your way to play, I think. Next we have the changes to early unit Nexus damage that they hinted at in the last patch notes. Crimson Disciple now only deals 1 damage instead of 2. I think that's a good change. The card was doing a lot of work, a lot of damage for a 2-drop. It was virtually unblockable. It was really obnoxious to attack into. It provided a great source of damage with stuff like Transfusion and Demolitionist. And now it's going to be a much more marginal card. I understand why they changed it. It will make the card see a lot less play, but I agree that the Noxus package of these cards just kind of dealt way too much damage for also being units. Like, it dealt burn spell level amounts of damage while being also units, which is like Demolitionist plus Disciple together dealt like 4 direct damage while also providing you effectively with a 2/2 and a 2/3. That is just so good, and so much more, and additional potential of dealing damage with Disciple, with buffs, or with additional self-harm like Transfusion. This is definitely a really big hit, but ultimately I think it's for the better. The package was a bit too pushed when they released Demolitionist, and I think this reins it in. It's still a decent body, a 2-cost 2/3 with upside is still fine, but yeah, it's not a great card anymore. It's just a fine role player at best. The other change, sorry about that, my throat is a bit rough today. The other change is to Legion Grenadier. It also now only deals 1 damage instead of 2, but it became a 3/2 instead of a 3/1. I kind of like that change, like the card before was more of a burn spell with a body, and now it's more of a body with a small upside, and a 2-cost 3/2 with small upside is pretty nice. It also is particularly nice for still for like Sejuani and Swain and Gangplank type stuff, while being more of a real unit and less of a direct damage source, which is kind of nice. Like, I think Legion Grenadier will show up in a lot more decks where it before was too fragile and you didn't care enough about dealing 2 damage, like for example in some Sejuani or Gangplank decks where they are more mid-rangey and you only care about them taking damage, not how much damage they take. But you much rather have a 3/2 that deals 1 than a 3/1 that deals 2, because you care more about units and board than burning your opponent. You only need the damage at the bare minimum to trigger your like level up stuff. So yeah, Grenadier, actually a more versatile and universally playable card now. Although obviously weaker at the like narrow focus of like hyper aggressive like direct damage burn style decks. Then Flash of Brilliance now costs 4. In the past we've adjusted Flash of Brilliance to make it more satisfying and effective when used with Heimerdinger, but the potential to create multiple 3/3/1s regardless of keyword without windows for interaction has proven to be an environment warping effect over time, and now Flash of Brilliance effectively always costs at least 1 mana. Honestly, I think the card is garbage now. It will be unplayable, and I think with the changes to Heimerdinger they could have left Flash where it was, because, you know, getting a free 3/1 fearsome, totally fine. Heimerdinger getting some kind of sort of free-ish payoff when you drop a 5-cost 1/3 was totally fine in my book. I think this Flash change was completely unnecessary, and I think this sort of cements the nail in the coffin for Heimerdinger for the foreseeable future, if I had to guess. So no playing Heimerdinger for anyone that loves Heimerdinger. Then we have the changes to the discard unit, which is pretty great. Some Dredger now is a 3-cost 4/3, but instead of discarding a card, you get to discard a card and draw a card. So it's basically like half of a Ramage, plus a 4/3 body. So this is very solid. It's pretty good, pretty interesting. I'm excited to experiment with like Jinx Draven, Jinx Twisted Fate in the upcoming streams. So stay tuned for that. And Zonite Urchin got streamlined along those lines. Now instead of the draw one being a last press, it sort of got upgraded to like drawing the card immediately. So that also makes Zonite Urchin slightly better. But some Dredger is like a notable improvement over the old one that was almost unplayable, and now some Dredger is a very solid unit despite being a 3-drop. Like a 3-cost 4/3 with no abilities is very decent, and a 3-cost 4/3 that lets you play your discard payoff cards for free and also replaces them with a real card is huge. So pretty excited about these. Also both cards now also help level up Twisted Fate, which is a big deal in a Jinx Twisted Fate deck potentially. Next we have Shadow Assassin. I've been on the side of nerfing Shadow Assassin for months now, basically since the first weeks of elusive dominance. It never happened, so I figured it won't happen. I figured they want to keep it around for what it does, and now it happened, but I don't like how it happened. Now it's a 3-cost 1/2. I think they really should have turned it into a 2/1. That still keeps the core functionality in play, intact, of it being sort of like a sort of sustain tool in proactive decks, still lets you trade in reactive decks, makes it much easier and much more free to deal with a much wider range of cards, makes it more of an opportunity cost to play because of stuff like Veil, Make It Rain, and all that stuff, making your deck really fragile. But at least you still have a body. A 3-cost 1/2 is simply not a body. I think this card's basically unplayable now. The body has no impact. As a 2/1, it's fragile, but it could at least trade with like 2-drops, for example, like 3/2s and stuff. Like it could have decent board impact. Granted, the opponent doesn't kill it with a random 1 damage thing. Now, the opponent doesn't even need to kill it. It's a jump blocker. It's useless. It's just really, really bad. 1/2 is just like 1 attack is just too low of an attack to matter in this game. The minimum you need is 2. So farewell, Shadow Assassin. Was nice knowing you. I don't think Shadow Assassin is a card anymore. I really hate this change. I agree with it. I agree with changing Shadow Assassin, but just make it a 2/1, please. Next we have Steel Tempest. This is kind of an unexpected but pretty cool buff. I agree, the card was overcasted, and now it's basically a better Guile. Problem with Guile is, despite it being cheaper, that you never really can trade for anything, because it's slow. This allows you to like do all the blocks you want, make them so that they are safe if the opponent doesn't do anything, and then if the opponent does anything to make the blocks not safe or tries to go for the kill with a pump spell, you have Steel Tempest to trade for said pump spell or said trick or whatever, and can really nicely counterplay stuff and sort of trade 1-for-1 with whatever they go for. So suddenly you have a stun effect that lets you trade with an opposing card as opposed to Guile, and at a very reasonable rate. I think this card's pretty great. 2-cost, like sort of universal insurance interaction is pretty sweet. It's not as tempo swingy as a Will was, for example, but it is as flexible as a Will is in the sense that it can stop most things. There are a few things obviously that it can't stop, like stuff like Atrocity, that sort of stuff, but it is actually like a pretty flexible, cheap sort of defensive tool in, for example, more controlling and mid-rangey Ionia decks. Not just Yasuo decks, but obviously in Yasuo decks this is really sweet. But even past that, in like maybe even in something like New Karma Ezreal, if that can still survive the changes. of Shadow Assassin and stuff like that. So yeah, Steel Tempest is a pretty sweet and reasonable card now that actually makes sense thinking about and considering when playing Ionia decks that aren't aggressive. Speaking of Ionia, next we have River Shaper. It's now a 2-2 instead of a 2-1. I like that change. Card was too fragile. Still probably not going to see much play, but it's a much more reasonable body now. This being a 3-1, a 2-1 was just too fragile, too unnecessarily fragile. And now it's a bit more likely to sort of survive and you being able to protect and stuff like that. And it's a bit more decent of a baseline body. Speaking of, next change, Will of Ionia. Went from 4 to 5. This was bound to happen eventually. The card was the cheapest hyper-flexible interaction in the game. If you look at it, something like Vengeance, that is equally flexible, costs almost twice as much. It costs 3 mana more. Sure, the difference of killing the unit rather than returning it to the hand can be pretty big, but it can also not matter at all. So putting them closer together, 5 for not killing them, 7 for also getting rid of the unit, seems like a pretty reasonable cost gap. And now the card will be more of a 0 to 2 off and rarely a 3 off. It will still sometimes be a 3 off, but I think a lot of decks that played it as a 3 off before will now play it as a 2 off, and some decks that played it before just because it was so good now will end up just cutting it and looking for other tools. Like, the more proactive you are, the less you're probably interested in 5-cost Will of Ionia, for example. But next we have Golden Narwhal. Got a bit of a nice change here. It went from 3-cost to 2-cost and from 2-4 to 2-3 to compensate. To be fair, the difference between 3 and 4 health is pretty big and means a lot more units in a lot more cases can kill this in one shot. Also can kill this without dying themselves. So it is a bit more vulnerable, but turning this into a 2-cost elusive is big. I'm so excited to go back to my Freljord Bilgewater elusive experiments with this. One of the bigger issues I felt that the deck had was that it didn't have a 2-cost elusive. All the elusives were 3-cost or more, basically the playable ones anyway. There's bad 1-1, 1 mana 1-1 elusives that don't count. And now having this 2-cost elusive, you have a much more reasonable curve and proactive potential that makes this pretty interesting. And I kind of liked this card before and experimented with it, and now it's even better. And there's still stuff like Pocket Aces to make this into a 4-4, for example, when the opponent challenges it with vulnerable and so on. So there are ways to protect that and punish the opponent. You can buff it with Sia, you can buff it with Fury and stuff like that. Definitely looking forward to exploring Bilgewater elusives, especially now that Ionia elusives probably have taken the final hit the final straw that broke the camel's back, basically. And in addition, they also changed Hunting Fleet. It went from 5 to 4-cost and from a 7-7 to a 6-6. It also got obviously indirectly buffed by the opponent getting a weaker Golden Narwhal that is 1 health lower. Seems like they really want this card to be playable, and I think as a 4-cost 6-6, we're reaching a range where it is a consideration, especially in more aggressive decks. You obviously want to play this on the turn you attack, so you can immediately kill the Narwhal with something, ideally that isn't even trading, and get a nice hit in with the 6-6. But after that, a 6-6 also really locks down the board very well. There are very few units in the game that have 6 or more attack. One of the more common ones, Rider, just got bumped down to 5, so suddenly almost all of the units you see in the game without any additional buffs are 5 attack or less, meaning Hunting Fleet can attack into them without trading and can also block them. So it could be an interesting card. I wouldn't know off the top of my head what to do with Fleet and if they ultimately good enough to play and what type of deck I would want to put them in, but it's at least a card now that is interesting to think about and consider for deck building, while before I think the card was irrelevant. So another nice sort of change to put a card into the realm of experimentation from the realm of being useless. Yeah, that's all the card changes. a lot of interesting changes here overall. I like the patch. Like I said, I think they over-nerfed Heimerdinger and as an extension Flash of Brilliance. And Shadow Assassin, those are like my two big gripes. I like that they changed both cards. I don't like how they changed them. But I think otherwise, looking at the patch, I really like the changes. I think they're very reasonable. They all seem pretty sensible and well measured. But yeah, those two changes I really dislike. I think they could have done a better job of changing these cards to keep them closer to like relevant playable cards while making them less strong and less universal and yes, dominant. I feel like they kind of broke them too much. But we'll see if there will be future changes that adjust these things. Heimerdinger, I could totally see being bad enough now that he will need some change down the line. Shadow Assassin, I think is unlikely to see a change, because even if it falls out of favor and doesn't see any play anymore, I don't think they will care enough to sort of actively make it good again. So I feel like we probably lost Shadow Assassin forever. It doesn't seem like the kind of card that would go back to like readjust or nerf or whatever. Would just be my gut assumption based on the past and on what type of card it is. I don't think they will suddenly go back and make it like a 2-1 or something. But maybe it'll prove me wrong, but I doubt it. And then we have some new personalization stuff from the event, like new boards and stuff. This cute new Guardian. Other new Guardians, like for example this variant on Silverwing with samurai helmet and stuff like that. We have deck bundles that you can buy for coins that will be reduced by the amount of cards you already have, just like the beginner's bundle basically. A whole bunch of expedition adjustments again for anyone that still plays Expedition. I haven't played one in ages, but check them out. They added and removed a bunch of stuff around. And then some bug fixes, and that's patch 1.6 for you. Pretty cool to see the first event and see how it plays out and what to expect from the future, and excited to explore the new metagame. One thing I'm a bit concerned about actually with the balance changes in the metagame is the entirety of like Riptide Rex decks that was already like pretty strong did not get touched on at all. So my guess would be one of the pillars of the new format and one of the dominant decks will be Riptide Rex decks, be it the Joani Misfortune or Ezreal Twisted Fate. So, and maybe some novel Riptide Rex things, but I think Riptide Rex is one of the most powerful and most swingy cards in the game right now that is worth sort of building around and playing and have sort of as a core part of your game plan. And yeah, Riptide Rex will dominate the new metagame, I think, in one way or another. But we'll see if I'm right or not. Alright, that's it again for this patch note review. As usual, let me know in the comments down below how you feel about my review, about my assessments, how you feel about the patch, where you agree and disagree and so on. Let's just have a nice conversation about what Riot has done this time. And yeah, other than that, you know the drill. Don't forget on your way out to hit the like button if you enjoy the content, subscribe for more, turn on the notification icon. You can find all the additional information in the description down below. If you want to further support me with donations, Patreon and so on, check that out. And yeah, that's it again for this time. I'm your host ManuS. I thank you for watching and I'll see you next time. Bye.